Energy vampires don't just drain your energy and leave. The drain itself is only a part of the damage. It's similar to what happens when a leech bites a human body. The blood loss itself is only a part of the problem. There are other effects that affect the victim long after the interaction ended. In this video series, I'm taking a deep dive into how I believe interaction with energy vampires, such as narcissist and psychopath, affects the donor's energy and overall well-being. Based on these hypotheses, I'll also share practical strategies that I found helpful during my own recovery journey. One quick warning, what you'll hear here is probably very different from what you've heard before. Welcome to Ditch the Leech, the channel about ditching energy vampires. Today we're talking about recovery after this horrendous form of abuse. If you survive this, you are a hero. So let's briefly discuss the effects of energy vampires on human energy, because to understand the solution, it's really important to see the problem clearly. This video is going to have a conversational format where I'll record as I read my script, so it feels like we're having a conversation. Let's get started. The effects of energy vampires. I'm going to start with a little story. One of my energy vampire relatives loved leeches, the medical kind. And I remember how she told me about their remarkable after effects on human blood. And as an adult who spent my life being drained or trying to run away from yet another energy vampires, I went through detox from it far too many times. And it finally clicked for me. Energy vampires affect human energy just as leeches affect human blood. No wonder that relative loved leeches so much. So I started studying hematophagous organisms, and I was shocked by what I discovered. It explains my experience a lot, and I want to share it with you in case it's helpful. I believe that energy vampires are a much more advanced type of entity than many people think. They don't just drain the donor's energy. Like leeches or mosquitoes, the animals that feed on blood, energy vampires have certain effects on their donors that make feeding easier. In other words, I believe that energy vampires change the donor's energy system. The most obvious effect they have is that of energy redirection. It's like installing a Wi-Fi for personal use, but somehow everyone in your building gets connected to it without your permission. You're left wondering why your connection keeps getting slower and weaker. Other effects are more subtle, aimed at making a potential donor, usually a very resourceful, strong, capable, talented individual, voluntarily give away their energy to an energy vampire. It's like a donor, without knowing it, agrees to be constantly drained to sustain energy vampires. Most donors, of course, don't realize what they're doing. They may be deeply traumatized individuals who were raised by energy vampires, so they're conditioned from childhood to accept this dynamic. I call it grooming. If a child is groomed, taught from childhood to sustain energy vampires, then naturally they may end up in romantic relationship with energy vampires and without realizing it remain trapped in this for a lifetime. So how do energy vampires do this? What do they do to their donors to make them stay as energetic blood bags? The first effect is they speed up the donor's energy. I certainly feel it when I encounter an energy vampire. My energetic flow becomes faster. That's why after interaction, it can be hard to sleep. Thoughts feel restless. There may be anxiety, nervousness, impatience, impulsivity, and in some cases, my arms were shaky. It can also be why the interaction sometimes feels positive. And I feel very passionate about sharing this message because I think it's very important. Interaction with energy vampires, because of this effect, can sometimes feel positive. Because donors who go through this kind of abuse, when they leave, they often become extremely depressed, apathetic, or even feel like they don't want to live. So their energy gets in that state stale and stagnant. And if a donor in that very low state interacts an energy vampire, it can feel like a highly positive encounter. Similar to giving someone who struggles with thrombosis a drug that improves blood flow. And that makes it even more confusing for a victim and even harder for a victim to live. Because they think, oh my God, that person helped me so much when I was at my lowest. I felt better after being around that person. They cannot be bad. And that's how this cycle starts. After one abusive relationship with energy vampires, the victim leaves. Naturally, they become depressed, apathetic because of the abuse they encountered, because of the wounds they're carrying, because of the pain they go through. And then in that state, very low state, when their energy is stale and stagnant, they encounter an energy vampire, and it feels like a positive encounter. But it's not. It's not positive. It just feels like that in that state. And then they have that temporarily relief, but that's a trap. Now they're entangled with another energy vampire. Next, energy vampires can create addictive effects in the victim. Leeches in nature release compounds that reduce pain. So the host, or the donor, right, doesn't fully notice what's happening while they'll feed. It's only after separation, when those effects fade, does the pain become clear. Sounds familiar? I don't know about you, but I clearly felt it while I was with one of my energy vampires, and I had quite a few encounters. It's like I had out-of-body experience every time the abuse was happening. I was there, but I dissociated. While the energy vampire was actively destroying me, right, like hurting me, I didn't feel the full magnitude of the pain. I felt some of it, but it was only after I left, whereas the pain became really like overwhelming. And this is another trap. Because I thought, oh my God, if it hurts so much, I must have made a mistake. I must have done something wrong. So I went back. So do you see what I mean when I say that energy vampires create adaptations in their donor's energy system that makes them easier to drain? Now, effect number 3. They destroy the donor's energetic boundaries. Leeches have something similar. They release antiplatelet and anticoagulant, vasodilative compounds to the donor's blood. And platelets act as your body's boundary system. When breach happens, they work to aggregate and stop the leak. And that doesn't work when leech gets attached. So they can drink a lot of your blood very easily, very fast. And in my case, I felt like my boundaries were just not working when I was next to the energy vampires. When I left, I felt like my boundaries were corroded to the core. So that, I believe, is the effect number 3. Next effect, there is also this paralyzing effect. This one, in my opinion, is the worst. In psychology, they call it learned helplessness. It's when the donor gets this weird, hard to explain sense of paralysis, making it very hard for the donor to leave the energy vampire. So certain species of fleas, which are also hematophagous organisms like leeches, have similar effects. They can partially immobilize the donor so it doesn't resist while they feed on it. And I believe energy vampires can have a similar effect on human energy and will. Now, the last effect that I'm going to discuss here is that leeches infect energetically their donors. They drain the donor's energy, but they also throw energetic garbage on the donor. By the end of the interaction, it can feel almost like identity theft. There is a concept in some magical tradition where someone steals your destiny. I think that is in some ways. This is what happens here. The energy vampire becomes you, taking good in you they chose you for, while dump on you all they hated in themselves. And in worst case scenarios, donors can get seriously sick. Again, just like some mosquitoes and leeches carry diseases like malaria causing parasite or Zika virus, leeches can have the same effects. Recovering from the damage energy vampire leave behind. Overall, I see the effect caused by energy vampires as having 4 levels. First, there is a cord, the attachment, the energetic connection that keeps pulling on you. In the mosquito analogy, it's the energetic equivalent of the mosquito's feeding tube inserted in your skin. Second, there is a puncture, the wound in the energetic field where the interaction occurred. In the mosquito analogy, it's a wound that stays even after the insect flies away. Third, there is a residue, all the stuff that lingers in your system after the interaction is over. In the mosquito analogy, it's everything that makes the bite itch after. And occasionally, there's a 4th element, the poison. In the mosquito analogy, it's a disease that comes with a bite. If you get really unlucky and got bitten by a malaria-carrying insect. And based on this, I see 4 steps to recover: cutting the cord, dealing with residue, healing the wound, and boosting energetic immunity. And this video covers in details step 2 through 4. Step 1, cord cutting, I covered in detail in part 1 of this video. And cord cutting is the most important step in the entire recovery process. So if you haven't watched the part 1 of this video, I recommend starting there first. So how to recover after interaction with energy vampires? And again, I mentioned that step 1 is cutting the cord. I'll touch it on here briefly because it's such an essential step. Unlike leeches in nature, which attach for about 30 minutes, get some small amount of your blood, and fall off, energy vampires needs a constant supply of energy. And since they are the same size as you, right, they're human, unlike a leech, to get full, they need all you've got. That's why they establish that energetic cord and maintain it. With constant pinging, I call it pinging, maybe there is a better term for it, meaning they can call you when the energetic connection get weaker. Sometime come across you on the street, whatever they need to do to establish that connection. And in my experience, they don't detach voluntarily while their victims still have some juicy resources. So if I want to stop being drained, I must cut that cord. Cutting the cord is essentially no contact. You've probably heard about this in numerous other videos. In my case, that meant cutting off not only the main energy vampire, but also everyone connected to them, including the flying monkeys, the term used to describe people who try to lure you back into talking to your main bloodsucker. So I cut off everyone, and that's what worked for me. So the moment when someone starts talking to me about the chief bloodsucker, they're out of my life. Again, since my situation was quite severe, really severe, that's what I had to do. And I am really happy I did that. Even more than that, if I identify someone as a leech, and I learn to identify them quite early at this point, they automatically go into the no contact category. Because I don't think it's ever safe for someone who is a chronic donor to interact with energy vampire. Even if it's a minor interaction, like having an energy vampire as my hairdresser or going for coffee together. Watch my video named Donor versus Creator if you want to learn whether you're a chronic donor or not. So I find it helpful to quit them the same way people quit smoking. Just quit all energy vampires cold turkey. No exceptions, no just one more, no special occasion. What's the point? They weren't adding anything valuable to my life anyway. I also mentioned salt as like additional something to help to speed up the process. Of course, if you just use salt and still stay in contact, for me personally, it didn't work. But ordinary table salt has long been associated with purification and cleansing. And in nature, it's even used to repel leeches. So I find it helpful too. I don't know the science behind it, but I do notice a significant difference. I use just regular table salt and I use it in bath, body scrubs. I go to salt caves with this halotherapy. Sometimes simply swimming in an ocean with salt water is helpful. So if you want to learn more about that, also watch the part 1 of this video or make your own research. Google it. And if your healthcare provider approves this, try it. Step 1, dealing with residue. In addition to cord and energy drain, I believe energy vampires affect the victim's energy in a way that makes them easier targets for future drains. What I'm sharing here is just my guess, so take what you want and leave the rest. I am just like majority of you. I don't see energetic fields and cords floating around people. I'm just someone who has had a lot of encounters with energy vampires, narcissists, and other toxic personalities, and I had them as family members, romantic partners, friends, bosses at work, and even as mentors and yoga teachers, guys. So I've been drained multiple times. And I went through the recovery process multiple times. And after enough repetitions, patterns started to emerge. And one of them I already mentioned, paralysis-like effects. I feel stuck, trapped, like I can't leave even when I know I should. And it's not just emotional, it's action paralysis. I can't take any action related to leaving the leech, such as finding a new apartment, finding a new job, and so on. Second, anticoagulant-like effects. My energy speeds up. I feel restless, nervousness, agitated when the energy vampire is feeding on me. My energy feels like it's being pulled outwards, scattered, overstimulated. Vasodilator-like effect in an inability to set boundaries. It feels like I can't stop myself from giving in. I promise myself I'll leave the moment they raise a voice, but I end up doing exactly what the leech wants me to do every single time. For example, I may know I shouldn't talk to a certain person because they're energy vampire. I would promise myself not to engage next time I see them. Yet when I see them, I can't stop myself from getting into the unhealthy conversation. Next one, anti-inflammatory-like effects. It's like I don't fully notice how I'm being used and abused. My energetic immunity doesn't notice the intruder. I think it's all okay. until I start feeling unwell. I also tend to get sick more often with these people. Next one, anesthetic-like effects. So there is a strange sense of high around this person. It feels almost like a drug, artificial but compelling. And when I'm away, I don't feel relief, I feel withdrawal. Like something is missing, like I need a fix. There are, of course, more facts, but I'm still working on structure and everything. It's just my draft, and I just wanted to share because I wish somebody shared that with me. The earlier the better. 10 years ago, 20 years ago, the earlier the better. Let's now talk about healing. How do we flush that off our system? Energetically, I think of this as like a junk in the energy field, heavy, dense residue that makes energy feel weighted down, stagnant, toxins in the energy. So, metaphorically, I see this as dialysis. When the blood becomes toxic due to kidney failure, the person is connected to a machine that filters and purifies that blood externally. I think an energetic equivalent of dialysis is pranayama. Practices like rebirthing, holotropic breath work, and kundalini yoga practices involve intense breathing techniques that, in my experience, act like a form of energetic dialysis for stagnant and heavy energy. And I personally practice kundalini yoga. And I've also explored rebirthing and other intense breathwork methods, and I find all of them helpful in different ways. Another way I like to look at it is like airing out a house. When the air becomes stagnant, opening the windows helps clear things out. I see pranayama in a similar way, especially the more intense forms. In this video, I'm not going to recommend specific pranayamas, but you can go ahead and just Google pranayama or kundalini yoga practices. There are dozens and dozens and dozens of videos. There are also herbs that can claim to be helpful. I personally found oregano and thyme helpful. Garlic worked for me too. However, of course, ensure to speak to your doctor before trying out anything, because herbs can affect your physical health in addition to energetic state. And there are a few other that traditionally associated with clearing or protective properties, including sage, rosemary, and basil. Also, any legit spiritual purification processes can help with that, like fasting, praying, going to high energy places like church, monasteries, water purification ceremonies, drinking water, especially the one that is positively charged. Clearing that residue is not a one-day process. While the timing can vary from person to person, for me it takes at least 3 months to start to notice a difference. I personally combine several practices, including following a spiritual fasting, which for me was just going vegan, practicing kundalini yoga daily, praying, drinking tea with certain herbs. And I also did this personal review, which I shared with another person practice. I sat with myself and I looked honestly at why I kept ending up with energy vampires again and again. It's kind of like a confession practice. I find that helpful if you believe in those traditions. I personally found that very helpful. Next step, healing the energetic wound. Now let's talk about the wound itself. It's the actual injury, the place where the bite happened. If we go back to leech analogy, this is a stage where I stop worrying about the leech and start treating the wound it left behind. The hole in the skin, the damage, the place where something attached itself and fed. And how do we treat a wound in a physical world, right? We clean it, we protect it, we cover it with a clean bandage, right? And give it time to heal. We don't keep rubbing dirt into it. We don't keep exposing it to the infection. We don't pretend it's not there. We protect it until the body has a chance to do what it was designed to do, heal. For me, the energetic equivalent of that is temporarily isolation. If my energy field has a wound or multiple wounds, I need to protect it. I need to cover it up. I need to step away from other people's energy long enough for my own system to recover. I think of it as quarantine. If I, for example, were in a situation where something happened to my skin and I have multiple wounds, I might really want to go dancing, right? Or go to a public space, but it's not safe. It's not safe because I'm vulnerable to all of the infection that is just naturally happens in the environment. And if I'm in a wounded state, I really benefit from some form of a quarantine. It's just how I see it and what was helpful to me. I know some people will disagree. They will be like, but no, support system is important. And they're right, support is important, but I was a chronic donor. I was groomed from childhood to be compliant, convenient, accommodating, and endlessly giving. And because of that, I didn't actually have much support. What most of the people around me weren't there because they cared about me. They were there because I was useful, easy to use. At the time, I didn't understand that. Being taken advantage of what was normal to me. It was the water I swam in. And when I was in a very low energy state, that interaction was very damaging for me. And that's where I made one of the biggest mistakes of my life. I didn't give myself time to heal when I was wounded. I acted as if nothing happened. The next morning I got up and continued living as thought I was perfectly fine. And what I noticed was that whenever I was in that wounded state, I attracted energy vampires like crazy. Almost as they could smell that energetic blood leaking out of me because I'm wounded. And maybe that's not such a crazy idea because, if somebody with multiple wounds on the skin goes to swim in the water where there are leeches, of course, they just gonna run toward that person. Predators in nature often target wounded animals. And I noticed that whenever I was emotionally bleeding, exhausted, lonely, desperate for connection, desperate for validation, desperate for relief, that's when they showed up every single time. And for years I was trapped in that cycle, I'd escape one energy vampire only to fall straight into the arms of another. What finally helped me break free was temporary isolation. I know that sounds extreme. But I realized something uncomfortable. I had a lot more energy vampires around me than I initially thought. I noticed that when I let one in, I let many in. It felt less like a relationship problem and more like an infestation. It's almost like a parasite. If it gets into the system, it multiplies and colonizes the host, forming biofilms. And I felt like I had that in my life with energy vampires. So I chose temporary isolation and quarantine. I gave myself time alone. Just to get to know myself again and to dive into studying this topic, what narcissists are, what they do to their victims, what gaslighting is, what projection is. I asked myself what I need to learn so I don't fall into this trap again and how to build myself back up. So the first problem that I encountered that I wanted to share about in case you find it helpful too is I call energetic bleeding. And in my experience, energy vampires do something extremely painful, dehumanizing, or deeply hurtful during the final stages of relationship, the discard phase. And this triggers intense emotions and severe emotional pain in victims that is just impossible to forget. They do this because every time you experience severe, agonizing emotional pain, And think about the energy vampire. You send them your energy. And of course, if you have a cord, guess what? Tons of your energy go to energy vampire. It can sustain them for months and even years. That's why they try to hurt as much as they can, beyond what they think is possible. So that pain just remains so strong that even if they leave for years, it's just they still get some of that energy. Now what I notice, even when the cord is out, the pain remains, and it may be so severe and so strong that you just waste away all your energy by just constantly relieving that. In my experience, the more time I was away from, these people, and I had multiple experiences as I shared, the more my eyes would open. I'm like, oh my God, that's what they did. And then just the wave of pain all over and over again. And emotion is energy in motion. Every time, you release that agonizing pain, every time you replay those events in your mind, every time you open the wound, it's an energy loss. And I call it energetic bleeding. And I've been bitten by actual leeches several times. What happens with blood is interesting. Even after the leech detaches, the bleeding can continue for hours afterwards. Very long. That's because leeches inject the substances such as hirudin in the bloodstream that interfere with clotting. And we talked about it before. And the bleeding can last a very long time. And the same with energy vampires, I believe. So it's just longer. It's a longer process. So how do you stop an energetic bleeding? In medicine, one of the simplest approaches to apply is pressure to the wound, right? So I started wondering, what would be the energetic equivalent of applying pressure to the wound? So here is what I came up with, and it seems to work for me. So whenever I notice my thoughts drifting toward an energy vampire, instead of following those thoughts, I redirect my energy back to myself. Like I look at it as applying the pressure to the wound, so pressing toward myself. So I put my attention inward and I start affirming things about myself. So if my thoughts wants to start thinking about energy vampire, I stop it and I start thinking about myself. That's what I see equivalent of applying energetic pressure. So I can say, I'm strong, I'm capable, I'm worthy, I deserve my own attention, I deserve every ounce of my energy. Things like that. So every time my thought starts running toward the energy vampire, I gently redirect them back to my goals, back to my life, back to myself. Sometimes, especially if the person pings me or I accidentally see them, the bleeding may be so strong that I can't redirect it back to myself. What I found helpful is thinking about my understanding of God, a higher power. This is way more powerful to me than thinking about myself. And I can even say it out loud, like something like, my higher power or God. I'm just getting very emotional right now. I know I'm sending a lot of energy to this person or wasting it away. I don't want it to go in. Like, can I just give it to you, God? And like, I just visualize like all of that energy, instead of like being sent to the energy vampires, I just give it to God. Like, God, use it for something good. I just don't want to feed that energy vampire who is very nasty human being in my understanding of it. I just don't want to invest in their growth in any way. I don't want a single ounce of my energy to go toward building that person. I don't want to, like, it feels like energetic crime to me. I don't want to do it, but it's just the pull right now is so strong. Can you please take that energy? I just want to think about you, my higher power. And that helped me a lot. And the third methodic that I find helpful, there is this book called Letting Go, The Pathway of Surrender. David Hawkins is the author, and he presents this method that I found very helpful in that state, in this phase. So whenever I feel the pain, I just surrender it, so I feel it. I don't run away from it. How I see the process is if I can catch the sensation in my body and just keep it there without letting it go to the thought form of it. It's like I can keep that energy in my body by doing what David Hawkins presents. I'm not going to go into details because there are so many videos about this book. I actually found out about it in one of the YouTube videos myself. It's called, again, Letting Go, The Pathway of Surrender, David Hawkins.